two. It is already there. All right, cool. It is going. Yeah, I just forgot about the lag time. So, yes, it is up. It is running. Everything looks good. Well, that is excellent. So, let's go ahead and jump in. Welcome to it, folks. As usual, we are covering once again all of our local real estate information, interesting news that's been coming up, maybe things relating to how inflation is affecting folks, whether you're buying or renting. And of course, we always do that with some fresh coffee. And I actually had someone last time tell me I need to stop drinking coffee out of one of these things because it's metal and it adds a metallic taste. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I like my coffee to stay warm. So that means I'd have to what, buy a glass inside thing? So I don't know. We'll see. They didn't offer any suggestions. They just told me I was drinking it wrong. Um, so I want to welcome any newcomers. This get together was originally scheduled via Meetup when I did it in person, and we'd all meet at a local Starbucks and hang out. And we typically got a handful of folks who wanted to talk about different aspects of real estate and investing and whatnot. Um, and it's been interesting to do this now as a online event. What's been interesting is obviously I'm not getting as many people coming on the moment, right? So when we're actually talking here live, I from time to time we'll get folks will maybe answer a question or two, but I'm amazed at how many people are watching this after the show. So I guess that's okay. I mean, I was kind of hoping this would take the place of my podcast, which kind of does the same thing. I do a podcast. I talk about the various news of the day. I invite people to reach out to me. But I was hoping this could be more of a give and take. So if you are enjoying this after it's been recorded, I'd really hope two things. One, come and join me live so we can talk about things back and forth. I love talking to people. I love having conversations about what's going on in the market. But when I do that on a one-on-one basis, no one else is benefiting, right? But if we can do it here during the coffee and real estate get together, then everybody benefits, right? It's not just you and I having a conversation about that house you're thinking about buying in Redwood City or that land you're thinking about buying in Gilroy and whether or not you want to buy in a place that's already got HOAs. All of those things are great, and I think it's fantastic information, but I'd really love to share it in a way that not just that gets better benefits for everyone, right? Not just to benefit you, which is fine, but to benefit everybody who's listening to the presentation. So, if for some reason it's impossible for you to do it at 10 a.m. on a Saturday, I would love for folks to give me ideas of better times. I'm not a sleep late on the weekends guy, so for me it's very normal to get up early and do lots of stuff. Today's already been a pretty productive day, but I realize there are folks out there that they work hard all week. They're having to be to work at 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever time it is, and they cherish the ability to sleep in. And if you're sleeping until 10 a.m., that's fine. If this would be better as an afternoon thing, I'll be happy to try that. That gets tough. In my line of work, my weekend afternoons are often spent out doing real estate stuff. So that might be tougher, but I would love to accommodate as many folks as I can so we can get good conversations going. We have a variety of interesting ones. I'm really excited about. I've done shows before about these guys, and what's amazing to me is they reached out to me. So it's like, and this is going to sound geekier probably than when I say it out loud than it did in my head when I just thought it up. But this organization is one of those ones that I subscribe to. I keep track of what they're up to all the time. So I'm a little starstruck that they even knew who I was. It's the Pacific Legal Foundation. I've talked about them on a number of different podcasts. These are folks who really fight for your property rights. They've won tons of Supreme Court cases. I mean, these guys are awesome. When one of my sons told me he was interested in potentially going into law after school, I said, hey, if you can do a internship, go sit on these folks' steps and don't leave until they let you be an intern. Because they do great work. And what's interesting is they recently did, and I guess the reason they reached out to me was I did a podcast on this subject, and I wanted to cover it again because I think it's a good one to discuss. I think it's a fundamental infringement on what nobody should be able to tell you can or can't do. So we'll talk about that as well. To kick off the show today, let's go ahead and take it right into just a quick plug for me. I know that I always feel a little guilty when I do this, but I just want to give you the latest update since the last time that we talked. In fact, let me put my ugly face on the other side. A couple of things have happened since last time we talked. There's a new article that's going to be coming out that I'm writing for the website. For this, it'll appear here on this website. It'll be down here in this little scrolly thing for the different shows. So feel free to check that out. If you're already on my mailing list, you'll get a notification that it's in the works or been posted. The other thing that's interesting is I just posted about a week ago an interview with some buyers of mine from the first half of 2021. And we took a whole hour and we chatted about their experience. And I think it provides a lot of interesting information that could benefit not just buyers, but sellers as well. We covered we cut up the experience into the home search process, the offer process, and the escrow process, and trying to touch on some of the things that were the biggest problems for them. What were some of the biggest frustrations? I mean, me as a real estate guy, I was first licensed as a real estate agent in 1988. So I've been doing this a really long time. So the stuff that is just I don't even notice it anymore, can really scare some folks and can be a source of frustration and concern. And it was great to have this conversation with them to let them share some of those experiences. So feel free to check that out. It is an hour. I realized that we're in short attention span theater when it comes to the normal folks out there. Hopefully everyone can sit for a full hour and listen to it. I thought about chopping it up into 15-minute chunks, which YouTube and Facebook and everybody tells me you need to be in 15-minute chunks. And that really annoys me. So I realized maybe my marketing message would be better if I did it in 15-minute chunks. But I guess the problem I have with it is it assumes a level of insulting you, because I'm basically telling myself no one's got the attention span to invest in a concept for more than 15 minutes. And I think actually someone told me the new number is 6 minutes, and that's just sad. That's like my kids at 4 years old, right? No attention span longer than 4 minutes. All right, so why am I showing you my webpage again? Well, it's just basically, if you wanted to listen to that interview, you can do it right here at the show, at the webpage. It's right there at the bottom. But you can also subscribe to the podcast, which in a variety of different ways. You could just do the RSS feed and go old school if you're a what the kids call a boomer. Or if you're on iTunes or iHeart or Google Play, SoundCloud, whatever, I think iTunes, iHeart, and Google Play and the RSS feed are probably the most user-friendly ways to get access to that stuff. But I'm sure you have your way, so feel free to take it however you like. My goal is to do those once a week. It doesn't happen. It tends to be a couple of times a month, and I apologize for that. And I do get people complaining that I'm not posting enough shows, but it's been super busy, and I haven't had the time. I will earnestly endeavor to do more. Another thing I wanted to share, and I believe I shared it last time, is you can now schedule a consultation with me right here on the front page of the website. So this could be a precursor to doing a full market analysis of your property if you're interested in selling, or just figuring out how much your home is worth. If you're trying to do the math on whether or not you should sell your home or keep it and rent it and then buy some other property where you want to go, I mean, these are the kind of numbers that are good for you to have to think about the process rather than just jumping in and assuming something. So feel free. You just click it. It'll expand. It'll show you the opportunities for you to connect. And I believe I've got it in 30-minute chunks. Don't feel like I'm going to hold you for 30 minutes. If you have a 15-minute question, we'll shove it into a 30-minute scenario, and then we'll just call it quits before the meeting time is over. So I've managed, this has been super popular with an awful lot of folks. So I just wanted to share it again because it's been kind of amazing how many people have reached out using this tool to have some private conversations about your personal real estate needs. All right. So let's go ahead and jump in. Is there anything else that I've added to this that I think is worth your time? Not right at this minute. Okay. I think we've talked about all the other stuff. All right, so let's go ahead first and talk about this because I really get annoyed when you get people, well, just wanting to tell you what to do. To give you a little background, I did a podcast on this, so I apologize for those of you who are listeners to the podcast because this will obviously be a sort of a repeat for you. But to give you some background, I believe it was Oregon. I'm almost sure it's Oregon. Yes, Oregon was passing a law that real estate agents were no longer allowed to submit what's called a love letter with an offer. Your agent probably refers to it as a cover letter, and in it, there will simply be narrative, sometimes a picture, whatever, but it is intended to soften the edges of a stone cold offer, right? Because your offer is a contract. It's written in legalese. There is no warm and fuzzy in an offer, right? So the love letter is designed to try and establish a emotion-based personal contact between you, the buyer, and the seller. Whether we like it or not, sellers frequently will make selling decisions based on emotion. We all do it. We have all done profoundly stupid things and profoundly wonderful things based on emotion, right? So the crux of this, and this is really what annoys me, is that the assumption was it was too rife with the possibility of discrimination. That because you wrote this letter, you might include information in it that the seller will, in their head, discriminate against you because of, right? So in other words, you're guilty before you're even charged. Before anything happens, the assumption is someone else needs to intervene because you're not the person you need to be. And that kind of stuff annoys me right at the get-go. So there's that. The second part of it, well, there's multiple parts, but the second part was clearly in my mind an infringement on your First Amendment rights, right? I'm not a lawyer, but I have read the Constitution a couple of times, and it seems pretty clear that one of the things that we're protected from is anyone infringing our existing right, our acknowledged right to free speech. And this, I thought, clearly fell within that. When I did my podcast, I came at it more from the angle of why would you want to take away a tool like that in a market that's this nuts, right? So the third point, I think those first 2 points are enough, but the third point is if you have a scenario where you believe there's a high probability that you're going to write a letter that's going to make the seller like you less, well, then you're an idiot. You're not paying attention. You need to, and if you have zero information about the seller, yeah, you know what? If I have zero information about a seller and I'm writing a love letter, I am going to absolutely skirt covering anything in my mind I think might be prejudicial, right? But I can't think of the last time I wrote an offer where I didn't have some insights into the seller. Never met the seller, but I walked through their house. You walk through somebody's house, you're going to get an idea of what they love, and by association, maybe some things they hate. I can give you an example. Home I sold this year, these folks had a sort of an altar in their backyard that happened to also be part of the religious customs of my buyer. Do you think I mentioned that? Yeah, I did. And not only that, I'm pretty convinced that's one of the reasons why we got that deal. In a market where there were multiple offers, in this particular case over 20, that and several other things that I noticed after walking through a house. And imagine the things you're going to learn. Another example, a more recent one. Walked through a house. This person had a lot of what you might call patriotic memorabilia in the home. A lot of, and always check a bookcase, man. Look at the books in a bookcase to see who's there. And it was very clear things that this person was excited about. Well, it just so happened that my buyers in college were participants in a sport that related directly to that thing, right? In this case, it's a Second Amendment thing. It was someone who had very clearly strong opinions about the Second Amendment. And one of my buyers happened to win a shooting competition. Okay. So do you think I used that as a point in my letter? Yeah. Did we get the house? Yeah, we did. And I'm convinced that had a huge part in it as well. So it's not a question of whether or not you as a buyer and your agent should create a love letter. It's a question of how savvy is your agent at reading the room, right? That's it. It's reading the room. And because you're not in your room, you're in someone else's room, but you can figure out an awful lot through doing that. So it's about thinking your way through this process. At no time can you turn your brain off. Everyone wants just a list. Just do this. And when you write your letter, include this, 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 and this. Well, no, don't. Don't do that. That is going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. Are there people out there writing love letters that end up hurting them? All the time. All the time. I was selling a house. And we had someone who wrote a love letter, and my seller was very much into conservancy and solar power and, being socially conscious of her carbon footprint and a lot of things along those lines. In a community where that was a little bit less common, and we got a love letter from someone who, for whatever reason, pointed out things that were directly opposite of sort of her personal desires. Now, that person didn't get the house. And they didn't get the house because they pissed off my seller. Not pissed off, but annoyed her. And someone else that was in the same general bar park, but actually maybe from just an offer standpoint, a little bit less solid than that offer, ended up getting the house for that reason. So again, at every step, you need to be paying attention. Your agent particularly, and framing these things smartly, giving and understanding the context and understanding who the audience is and writing it appropriately. Okay, so this is from the Pacific Legal Foundation, and here's what's awesome. Here's why I'm dwelling on this one, and here's why I'm doing it first, because I know I normally do I normally do the straight up numbers, right, for the last month, or for in this case it'll be for October, and we will absolutely do that. But I wanted to bring this up because Pacific Legal Foundation reached out to me to let me know they were doing this. There's a lawsuit to deal with Oregon's ban on real estate love letters. I feel like they're going to win. And they reached out to me and offered to have one of the lawyers do an interview on my show, on my podcast. So I am hot to do that. And I am not only hot to do that, I am hot to anything real estate related. They do amazing work. If you haven't ever checked them out, just go up and do pacificlegal.org. Particularly here in California, where you'll find that the Coastal Commission somehow thinks that they have rights to tell you what you can and can't do because you have a 1 foot by 1 foot puddle in your yard, and that's why you can't build back there. So just a super great organization that's really out there fighting for stuff. And they are pushing against it. So on November 19th, they did their complaint. And you know what? The email I got from them was yesterday. So clearly they did the complaint and then reached out to me. And I'm super flattered that they even know who the hell I am. But what they point out, and I think is absolutely valid, love letters give buyers a chance at their dream home and help sellers to ensure their homes are well loved. Notice, no one's talking about a price in there. When you're selling, like my house, I have an absolutely irrational love of my house. I raised my 3 boys in this place. The only reason I'm still in it, because it's just me now. They're all off to college and doing their thing, and within the next year they'll all be graduated. Has been to give them that family anchor of their home where they grew up, right? So I've got absolutely some emotion-based stuff involved in the decisions I'm making. But then they go on to say the First Amendment protects exactly these sorts of conversations. It does, and it should. Next, the government cannot simply ban valuable speech because someone might use it to discriminate. Such a speech restriction cannot be justified unless it is absolutely necessary. And I generally dislike any laws that assume bad behavior before it happens, right? If you walk into a scenario and the person you're talking to assumes you're a scumbag, Does that set you off a little bit when they have zero evidence or information on that? So anyway, this is a great read. I would suggest you go and check it out. This is their press release, and I don't remember who they told me I might get a chance to interview. But I would imagine it'd be one of these two folks. The person who reached out with me was their media person. So I would be absolutely hot to talk to either one of these two fabulous gentlemen about this case. And I love that they're fighting it. So good for them. Let's go ahead now and talk about the numbers. And I realize this is the least sexy part of coffee and real estate. But, you know, some of the most sexy conclusions can be drawn from the least sexy data. Where should my ugly face be? I guess that's fine. Is my ugly face there going to be okay? It's blocking one of the things, but I'll try to keep that thing front and center. Okay, so this again, to remind everyone, is a look at October of this year compared to the October of last year. So it's a slice of time, right? And we do that to eliminate any seasonal influences, right? There's always stuff that happens because it's summer or because it's winter. This eliminates that. We only compare October to October. And that way we can sort of get a little bit more of an insight into, well, at this exact same time last year, what were we doing compared to what we're doing now? And I like to cover Morgan Hill, San Jose, and Santa Clara County simply because it's a increasing sample size, right? If I'm giving you a sample size that only is, like in Morgan Hill here, is only somewhere in the neighborhood of, 73 homes in October versus 44 homes in October of this year, those are relatively small numbers. So very small blips in that market can affect the overall feel. So I like to give us Morgan Hill, relatively small community with smaller numbers, up to San Jose, which starts to approach numbers that are a little bit more statistically reliable, to Santa Clara County, which has things happening in such a volume that any kind of trend you might be deriving from it is a little bit more reliable because it's a larger sample size, right? Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about it. We've got, in October of 2021 in Santa Clara County, we had 1,065 total active listings. That's all the homes that were available for people to look at and potentially buy. In San Jose, 474 of those, and in Morgan Hill, 44 of them. And as we go down the list here, that's a 47% drop from last year for Santa Clara County. That's a 49, almost a 50% drop for San Jose, and a 40% drop for Morgan Hill. So in terms of just what buyers can see out there, there has been a dramatic drop. Just in general. That is fairly normal for an October. We usually see things start to drop in October. November, clearly even more as we head into the holidays, so we'll be able to see the November numbers next month. The new listings, but again, remember, we're comparing October to October. So for the time of year, a drop in the total number of listings is considered relatively normal when compared to the rest of the year. But since we're seeing this being compared to the same time last year, that's pretty dramatic. I have no idea what is feeding this super low inventory. But one of the big things is folks aren't putting their homes on the market. If we look at the same areas, Santa Clara County had 1,516 new listings. That means people who listed their home in October. That's almost a 24% drop from the same time last year. San Jose, 780 homes were listed in the month of October this year. That's a 24% drop from the same time last year. And at the highest, Morgan Hill had the biggest drop of 26.3% from the same time last year. That's only 59 homes added to the marketplace, where at the same time last year, 80 were added to the marketplace. So just absolutely ridiculous numbers from an inventory standpoint. Overall inventory is down, and you can take some actual comfort from this. I realize not a lot, but that shows that we've had an awful lot of buy down of the existing inventory. Low inventory is always going to equal higher prices. That's just the way it works, unless you get a commensurate reduction in demand. That's the only way you can deal with it, unless you add more houses to the market. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. All right, so that's homes sold. Excuse me. Now we can do homes sold. What's interesting here is we also have negative numbers on homes sold, but again, that is less about not enough buyers in the marketplace and more about not enough properties to get sold in the marketplace. In Santa Clara County, we saw just under a 1% drop from the same time last year in terms of total number of homes sold. So really on par with last year. It's hard to take a stand on anything statistically significant happening in Santa Clara County in general with that number. That was at 1,589 was the total number of homes sold. In terms of San Jose, 810 homes were sold in the month of October, and that's a 2.2% drop from the same time last year. Again, not terribly statistically significant. But once you get to Morgan Hill, we only sold 66 homes last month, and that's a 17.5% drop from the same time last year. So that's a pretty significant drop, but I believe that also can be fed by the low inventory that we're seeing in Morgan Hill. And the fact that so many fewer homes were added to the marketplace in October. Remember, we're in a market where an awful lot of houses are selling within 2 weeks, and I think that played into it. All right, now average price or average list price, and I want to calibrate you to what I'm talking about when I talk about average list price in this particular instance. This is the original list price, and the reason why because we will use as list price, we will use whatever the list price was when the home sold in later data. But I like to share this here because it's a number that is not only important for buyers to understand in terms of, where is the market calibrated when homes first go on the market, but this is also a way for sellers to be calibrated to that experience they have when they list their home. This number represents the number that was written down on the listing when you signed the listing agreement. It doesn't represent it's been a month in the home and the price has been reduced. This is what your expectation was when you listed the house. When the agent sat down in your living room and got you to sign that listing agreement, this is the amount they said they were going to sell your house for. Okay? So this number is a great reflection of what were sellers' expectations in the month of October when they listed their properties. All right. So the list price in Santa Clara County was up. The original list price was up 4.5% to $1.64 million. San Jose was up 6.5%, so beating the county average at $1,231,425. So 6.5% increase from the same time last year. You know what? Let me get that out of the way so I can see any comments. I just realized there's a window over your comments, and that can't be allowed. All right, so where am I? List price, average list price. And Morgan Hill was $1,275,723, or 7.8% higher than the previous year. So that all represents expectations, right? In Morgan Hill, sellers are expecting that their home will sell on average for 7.8% more than it did last year. Right? So it's a number that I think informs decisions on both sides of that coin, the buyer and seller coin, in terms of what you're facing, in terms of properties on the market, when they get listed, to sellers who are listing their homes. Now, average sales price, this is what the home actually sold for. And some of these numbers are nuts. And the number that we're going to see for Morgan Hill, I think, is nuts in the way I talked about small sample size. So we'll get to that in a sec. Santa Clara County, average sales price, $1,697,666. And notice, obviously, that is higher than the list price. That was a 15.6% increase from the same time last year. San Jose, $1,318,959. That's a 10.1% increase. Morgan Hill, average sales price, $1,416,472. That's a 29.6% increase from the same time last year. I think there's an awful lot of stuff playing into this. I think in this particular one, while this number should still give you the same level of insight, I mean, I think if we were to really dissect this and go in there, a lot of this has to do with an awful lot of homes at the higher end that tended to sell that kind of skewed it. So we had some higher end homes in October that sold that skewed it a little bit. But I think there is still a lesson to be learned from this number, in that the dynamic of what's going on overall, where People don't have to drive into work as much. I'm finding an awful lot of buyers looking in Morgan Hill who are professionals who no longer need to go in the office. And I'm talking, I was just talking to someone from, where the heck were they located? Sunnyvale, who is looking to move to Morgan Hill. And they are they're a senior programmer at Apple. And they've pretty much been given permission to not go into the office anymore, or to only go into the office once a week. That's the dynamic I'm starting to see, and I'm seeing it from lots and lots of high tech companies. Cisco, Intel, Google, Facebook, Apple. The list goes on. There was even another guy who works for Electronic Arts. I don't think he's a programmer guy, but he lives all the way up in Redwood City, and he has started a search down here that's a little bit wider, everywhere from Gilroy all the way up. He wants a little more land, but the options have opened with companies that have decided to let folks work remotely. So I think a lot of that plays into that, because Morgan Hill's an awesome town. I mean, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and not all of Gilroy. I mean, there's some challenging areas in Gilroy, but I'm a fan of Gilroy. I'm also an architecture guy, and I love some of the architecture in downtown Gilroy. But there's some great places to live down here. And if you're someone who doesn't have to go into the office any longer, why put up with that if you can do better, or something that fits better for you? I don't want to poo-poo other cities, but hey, I used to live in Mountain View. I love Mountain View. Also has great architecture. When I lived in Mountain View, it was fantastic. So I get that there are folks who love that downtown feel, but there's an awful lot of folks who are shifting their attention to other communities and I know what's really surprising is I did a show. I don't remember if I did it here or if I did it on a podcast, but I talked about how I did a little road trip through the Central Valley and looked at properties in Tracy and just all the way down, and then looked down to Salinas, did that kind of whole crescent just outside what you would consider a reasonable commute. And I was amazed how many people were interested in chatting about that, because there are so many people now that don't need to stay close to work anymore. Okay. So next, percent over under asking price. And this is just what percentage have we seen folks getting on their properties? And in Santa Clara County, overall, and remember, this is the whole county, 107.5% of asking price. And by that, I mean the price that it was when the offer was accepted. So we talked about original list price earlier. This is the list price at the moment it was bought. And the odds are just as good that it was actually increased after it was initially listed as it was reduced, but 107.5%. And I realize we're taking a percent of a percent angers the statisticians in my audience. Deep breath. Let's take a deep breath and just enjoy the coffee part of coffee and real estate, because I still think it's an interesting thing. I still think you can get a little something out of it. So that was a 5% increase in that percentage when compared to the same time last year. San Jose, also at 107%, which was a 4.1% increase from the same time last year. Interestingly enough, not as much of a increase. Well, 104% is still an awful lot over asking price. 4% over asking price is a lot of money, particularly when the average home price is over $1 million, right? But that's a 3.4% increase. So while it's still competitive, and we're still seeing, and this is definitely something that feeds the multiple offer scenario, when you see numbers like this, you should be thinking, yeah, you know what? These folks are seeing multiple offers. It could be, because we're seeing dramatic differences, it could be that, not dramatic, I mean, that's less than a 1% difference between Morgan Hill and San Jose, but it could simply be a reflection of slightly lower competition. Maybe instead of 20 offers, I mean, the last San Jose set of offers I made, the folks I did the interview with were in the first part of the year. I did another San Jose offer, not in the same area. It was West San Jose, almost to Saratoga, and not as competitive. And you would have thought it would be, given where it was, but not a lot more competitive than stuff I've done here in Morgan Hill recently. I think there was in the teens number of offers, and I've seen several instances in Morgan Hill where you're looking at properties and you're making an offer, and you're competing with 10 other. The number seems less. So what I'm trying to communicate is it seems like a slightly less competitive market, but still super competitive. No, if there's a line and on one side of it is super competitive and one side isn't, we're definitely still on the competitive side, but it's less stressful than the early one I did this year with the folks I interviewed, where on the home they got, they had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, 22, 23 offers. Okay, days on market. Again, this is one of those numbers where I think right now in the market we live in is pretty useless. Um, 23.8% drop overall in Santa Clara County for 16 total days. It's 16 days across the board. 20% drop in San Jose, 33% drop in Morgan Hill. The reason why we're seeing it being the same exact number across the board is this is no longer a well, it is still a market decided number, but it is being decided. But the only reason it's 16 days is because that's how long real estate agents are making you wait. That's it. There is no other market pressure that's making this into 16 days. It's realtors who simply want to make sure that they get the broadest amount of exposure, the widest number of offers as they possibly can. And while some agents are out there just putting it on the MLS and hoping for the best, which in this market is I guess minimum bar of effort, there are agents like myself who still do a ton of advertising that's aimed specifically for that particular property and what it has to offer, both old school snail mail and email and advertising in specific venues that might have a particular interest in a property like the one that I'm listing. And you want all that to hit at the same time. And absorption rate of that stuff, email absorption rate is obviously nearly instant, right? Normally that stuff gets absorbed within 48 hours. And what if something's going to happen, it happens, right? Mail is a little different. Mail absorption rate, at least for my stuff, is about as much as 10 days from date of delivery. And then advertising in specific venues is a mixed bag depending on the size of the niche audience that consumes that product, right? If it's a thing where they only publish once a month, it's got a really long tail. If it's something where there's somebody who's publishing something every week, obviously a much shorter tail. So anyway, and that 16 days I think is a reasonable amount of time to make people wait. All right, so let's now shift our gaze from looking just at the month of October from this year and last year, and let's look at Santa Clara County, just looking over our shoulder. We're at October. We are looking back over the last whatever period of time. It's now over a year, going all the way back to September. I think it's actually August, and see what these numbers represent in terms of comparisons. And this is my favorite one: the total active listings versus new listings versus homes sold. And I'm just realizing you can't see my cursor when I do this. There's got to be a setting for me to make my cursor visible. But we're looking at, if I click it, it'll show, it'll show the little purple thing below it. And we're looking at the green line, the gray line, and the blue line. And what I look for is where are places where these lines cross or start heading in different directions. Now, the total active listings continues its downturn from what we saw in July. That's not awesome. Not unexpected, but if you look at July of last year, the blue line stayed flatter longer. We tended to keep a certain amount of inventory, and then we didn't really see a big drop until October, right? Or I'm sorry, where am I? Where was I just looking at the wrong thing? Yes, I was. I'm sorry. So October is right here. And there we go. Okay, yes, I'm sorry. So we are seeing the same trend. Dramatic, but even worse last year than this year. So we saw this dramatic drop that went right into December and then started to increase. But I always am interested to see when it crosses one. So the total number of homes sold, we've now seen new listings drop below homes sold, which indicates we should see a dramatic drop in total active listings, which we do because now we've sold everything that was listed this month. New listings are the new hot, right? Everybody wants to see the newest listings. So those are all selling, and we sold all those mostly. I'm sure there's crossover, but then it dipped into the inventory of existing properties that have been on the market longer than just the month of October. So this is all predictable or understandable at least in terms of what we're seeing. If we want to look at Santa Clara County list price versus sale price. This is another one where I really like to watch where it one overtakes the other. Now this is the average list price, the original average list price. This is the sales price. So we can see they almost kind of met last month, but this month they sort of diverged a little bit. And then of course there's percent of asking price, which just shows us, and then there's this guy right here, this standard bar that's averaging it all out. Just, I realize there's some variation here, but it's sort of averaging it out over the period of time, and you can see that's obviously on the uptick. The reason why there are 2 months missing is because there's 2 months when agents entered incorrect data, which screwed everything up. So I just deleted that because I didn't want it negatively affecting my stuff. And then, of course, there's days on market, where we can see that days on market, the last time we had high days on market was in January of 2020, where it was up close to 45 days. And it just dropped like a rock between then and May 20th of 2020, or excuse me, May of 2020. It just dropped like a rock. It dropped from about 40 to 45 days down to like 5 to 10 days. Just crazy numbers. And if I'm not mistaken, where are we? Okay. And this is right about, if you listen to the interview with the buyers that I have up as a podcast right now, this is right where they bought. So this, when things kind of were settling into this, as a result of policy decisions of agents, it was sort of sticking there, right? So that's where we find ourselves in terms of being calibrated. If we just look at Morgan Hill, we can see similar stuff. You'll notice a lot more jagged ups and downs in Morgan Hill, and that's because of the sample size, right? It would be a little bit more normalized if it was a larger sample size, but unfortunately we don't get that. But you can see that the homes sold, look at that, just jumped right up. We saw a ton of homes sold in October compared to September. Well, a significant increase, at least for the size of the market in Morgan Hill. And now it is going, the number of homes selling is outpacing again total active listings and new new listings. So we're selling everything that's being added to the market and dipping into the well of existing listings. In terms of average price versus sales price, average list price versus sales price, we have seen here where they've crossed over. So the average list price is way under the average sales price now. Not way. I mean, it's, we're still talking a pretty good chunk. Between these two lines is $150,000. So keep that in mind. Our scale is pretty crazy here. But for a while there, we were seeing some encouragement, right? We were starting to see the list price higher than the sales price, which indicated a market where you could potentially, and this is probably right around, the last deal I negotiated is probably right around there in Morgan Hill. Yeah, well, right around there. So, and that's where I was noting not as much competition. So anecdotal experience out in the field, doing stuff with clients is lining up with the numbers that we're seeing. All right. Excellent. Let's go ahead and jump into some more of the article stuff that we can talk about. I think that works for me. We already talked about the folks at Pacific Legal Foundation, and I really encourage you to check them out if you're interested. They've got all, I won't go into it here. They've got all their stuff, who we are, what we do, the goals, stories, getting involved, all that kind of wonderful stuff. So feel free to check that out. Let's go ahead and hit some of these other ones, though. Rent for single-family homes surged 10% in September. That's insane. And of course, and I don't understand why people don't get the connection here, but when home prices go up, rents go up, because the rental market is a cycling thing. With the way markets are right now, when investors see rents increasing like that, they think, well, I want to get in on that. So they want to buy a property. So when you buy a property at those new prices, your expectations are raised in terms of what, or you want to raise expectations on what people are going to pay for rent, because you've just bought that home at an increased price, right? And depending on how you did it, you probably bought it and had to do work to it. So you need to recoup those costs as well. So you're not, if that home was rented when you bought it, and this is a perfect example. I a few months ago, I helped someone buy a home in, how do I not remember, Stockton? And they were doing this as a rental, and they were going to house hack it. So they're in a duplex. They're going to live in one half, and they're going to rent the other half. And so the folks that were living in there, one was rented and the other one was vacant. But the folks that were in there were paying $1,100 a month, I think, in rental. So my folks go in there and they bought the place, and they had a budget of about 60 grand to do additional work. And so they went in there, made the place beautiful. Everything from the inside to the outside. So curb appeal all the way up. So if you're a renter who's looking in that marketplace, because we talked about it, how do you compete in a rental marketplace so that you're drawing the attention of the very best tenants? And I'm not talking about social standing. I'm talking about folks who are most likely to take the best care of the property, right? So folks like that come from all walks of life, but they also tend to have a history that you can find out about with other landlords. And if they take good care of properties, that's what you want, right? You want someone who's going to respect your property as much as you would hope they would. So went through, did the whole thing. One of them, I don't remember which one it was, if it was the one that was previously occupied or the one they were moving into. I know they overdid, interestingly, on the side of the one they were going to rent. So in that one, they redid the kitchen and put all new appliances in there. A lot of that just had that 70s thing going on. And the husband did a lot of the work, did a lot of DIY stuff. Not a carpenter, did a beautiful job in there in terms of, he did all the demo, they did all that stuff. And then had guys come in, they bought cabinetry and things elsewhere and coordinated it and had guys come in and install this stuff. Did a great job, ended up coming in under budget. But they ended up renting it for $1,400. So they ended up renting it for $300 more a month than the previous renter. And they had multiple folks knocking on their door to come and rent. And they're now actually kicking themselves thinking they may have rented it for too little compared to what the market would bear. So not a surprise that this is happening in an awful lot of markets. There are key points here on this article. Rents for single-family homes rose 10.2% nationally in September. Heck, what the example we just gave was more than 10%, right? $1,100 to what was $1,300 or $1,400. That's more than 10%. So there's an example right there of an increase that 10.2 may be the national number, but here, even in the Central Valley, it's higher. Miami saw the highest rent increase in the nation, and that's due to demand. There's an awful lot of folks looking for places to rent in Miami. The priciest rental homes are seeing the strongest rent increases, and that just kind of makes sense from what I just told you. The priciest ones are the hardest to buy if you're going to turn it into a rental, so you have more to recoup. So, and it's not landlords don't get to decide what the rent is. The market gets to decide what the rent is. But the market is so impacted now, and so many more rental units are needed that landlords are able to ask a premium. I check what my home would rent for probably once a quarter, probably every 3 months. I'll sit down and check it, do a little assessment. And I haven't done it yet this quarter. Obviously, we're only a couple months into the quarter. But the last time I checked, it had increased $200, $300 just from the quarter before. So these are constantly rising numbers. All right. So that's that one. I don't know why this site just... Okay, here are several things that I think all fit together that we need to be worried about in terms of anticipating what might happen in a market coming up. And if you've got a question about this, I see I've got a couple of people checking out the stream. Welcome to it. I hope you've got a cup of coffee that you're enjoying. My name's Robert Whitelaw. I am a real estate broker in Morgan Hill, in case you're not familiar with me. But I serve Silicon Valley all the way from Gilroy all the way up to Mountain View. So feel free to reach out if you need any help with anything. I've been doing this since 1988, so I'm pretty good at it. Well, or I've been doing it a long time, and I consider myself to be pretty good at it. And I think my clients do too, since they keep coming back. Credit scores reach an all-time high. And this is one that I think is interesting. For those of you who've been longtime listeners to the podcast, you know this should not encourage you. There is absolutely nothing that has happened that indicates your credit score should be better. You haven't changed at all. The people haven't changed at all. The folks who need help with their credit score have not gotten the education they need to improve their credit score. If your credit score is going to improve, it should be because you've learned how to manage your money better. You have matched your income with your expenses in a way that you don't default on things. Credit score has been the most messed with number over the last 8 years than any other time in history. Things that used to not affect your credit one way or another are now considered positive elements in your credit report. So paying your electric bill used to be a thing you couldn't count as good credit. Well, no one defaults on their power bill unless they're at the very end of their rope, because it's power. It's electricity. It makes your TV work. It makes your computer work. It makes your lights work. It makes your air conditioning work. It keeps your food cold. It is not something that is a valid representation of whether or not your credit is any good. Discretionary debt is what is a good measurement. That car loan that you went out and got, that's a good measurement. The other thing that's happened is medical defaults on medical loans or medical fees, medical bills, isn't counted anymore. They've been, and your phone bill is another one that suddenly is counting positively for your credit score. The last time we had a major downturn, right? The 2006, 2007. One of the major things that was a problem there was that no one paid attention to your credit score. You could get loans on stated income and just sign a piece of paper and you get a loan and you're good to go, which has started happening again, by the way. I get emails from lenders that tout how wonderful it is to get a signature-only loan. Granted, it's a higher interest rate, but it's still money you will get, and as just a person, you'll be on the hook for it if it's something that's federally insured and gets bought on the secondary market, which it will. That time, we simply ignored credit ratings. We disregarded them, all in the interest of helping underprivileged folks. Well, you don't help underprivileged folks by saddling them with more debt than they can handle. And we should have learned that lesson real quick from that experience. Didn't. While we should have been letting folks know, hey, listen, this is how debt works. This is how you can calculate what is good debt and what is bad debt. We simply, instead of ignoring credit ratings or disregarding credit ratings in a lot of cases, we screwed with how credit ratings get calculated. So now folks who would normally, we see a credit score of 810 here. I remember doing a podcast maybe 4 years ago. It should still be up there. If you want to go to soldbyrobert.com or therebelbroker.com, therebelbroker.com is a much more podcast-focused part of the site, so feel free to visit that if you'd like. I just do a search on credit score. I'm sure it'll come up. More than one. I've done a number of shows on this where if you had an 810 credit score today, if you were to do that same credit score 6, 7, 8 years ago, assuming the exact same person in life with the exact same debts, the exact same problems, your credit score would probably be under 750. At one point, there was an article touting how the average credit score had gone up 50 points, but no one wanted to try to explain how that happened because it did it so fast. But if you went and you looked at changes that were made and how your credit score is calculated 6 months earlier, well, that's where you find it. Suddenly, all these things that shouldn't be feeding a positive credit score are, and things that should be feeding a negative credit score aren't. So we've kind of stacked the deck in a way that lets people who, and nothing annoys me more than this. Everyone takes sort of this weird high ground, like, well, we need to make sure that underprivileged folks or underrepresented groups of one type or another, or folks who are low income should be able to have home ownership. I don't disagree with that, but you are not doing anybody a favor by selling them a house they can't afford. Bottom line, I'll tell you what, those of us who had to deal with the aftermath of 2006, 2007, and try to help people get out from under ridiculous debt because they'd been sold this debt, was heartbreaking, and it stunk, and I never want to see it happen again. So the solution to these, and on the flip side of that, a lot of these folks simply needed to be given more knowledge on how all this stuff works, how to manage your debt, how to manage your money, you know, how to spend wisely, right? And these are all just economic lessons that need to be learned. And instead of doing that, we screw with how the rating gets measured in hopes that good things will happen. Now, the only thing that we've got happening right now that's preventing this from becoming a catastrophe is not enough homes being built, not enough inventory, not enough folks who own a home selling them at rates that we have typically seen in the past, and not enough homes being built. But with the newest info here, looks like that's changing a little bit. Now, we're going to cover this one in a minute because I think this is super interesting and should worry some folks. Single-family home starts stall in October due to supply and labor shortages. So the starts have stalled. However, not home sales. Where's that other one? Housing starts decrease. Where is it? Okay. And I love that these all come from the same thing, and the headlines in some ways contradict each other. So we've got the most housing units under construction since 1974. All right. So what are some things that should immediately pop into your head relating to that stat? Well, okay, what was the population in 1974? Right? I mean, should we do that? I realize my computer slows to a crawl when I stream. Let's see. Population of California, 1974. All right, 21.1 million. And I know for a fact we're over 30 million now, right? In 2021. Let's see 2021. So 21 million. 39 million. It's almost 40 million people. Okay. Twice the number. So, if we have twice as many people in the state, shouldn't this number be twice as much as it was in 1974? Does that not make sense to anybody? Maybe a little? It does to me. Since this is specifically a product that is designed to satisfy the needs of the people living in the state, if in 1974 I had 20 million people living here, and in 2021 I have 40 million, whatever we were doing in 1974 should be double. So I'm not going to get a lot of comfort out of that. Housing starts decreased. Starts is usually, I believe they calculate starts from when paperwork gets filed, not from when they start hammering nails, right? It's permits, it's plans, it's that kind of stuff. Privately owned housing starts in October with a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 1.5 million. That's 0.7% below the estimate. Here we go. Building permits. Privately owned housing units authorized by building permits in October were at a seasonally adjusted annual rate. That's a 4% above the revised. So more activity there. So just sort of to calibrate you, right? Say what you want about comparing us to 1974. If we do compare ourselves to 1974, we're half of what we need to be. I opened this one thinking maybe it would be worth looking at, but I'm not 100% convinced. It basically just says if inventory stays low, we're going to see prices continuing to rise. And that's just the supply-demand equation being tweaked, right? Other California home sales down 10.4% year over year. Active listings down 18.3%. Boy, is that not true in our local market. That may be true when you take and so here's the other thing. As I've said, I do take a look at some of these Central Valley markets. I do that using Realtor.com. And sure enough, I see properties on the market a whole lot longer than here. I see properties selling for below asking price. I see prices being dropped on properties in those markets. So definitely we are an outlier within an outlying state. But these kinds of numbers are interesting to see from an overall standpoint, particularly if you're someone interested in taking advantage of the fact you don't have to live near work anymore. October sales pace dipped 0.9% on a monthly basis from 438,000 in September and was down 10.4% from a year ago. Unsold property index dipped on a month-to-month basis for the first time in 4 months, as active listings fell 18.3%. So that falls in with what we're talking about, where we've seen a drop in the overall inventory as things get sold off. Okay, what else? Single family home starts in October are having problems. Supply and labor shortages are a big thing. One of my sons, who's just about to graduate from college, has even talked about spending his first few months out of college working as a contractor, or working for a contractor. They're having a heck of a time finding folks, and the amount that you can get paid is pretty good. So he's looking at that. He's not afraid to do a hard day's physical labor. So that puts him in a pretty unique position compared to an awful lot of folks coming out of college right now. And finally, this Fannie and Freddie thing. We're just after 11. I appreciate those of you some of you didn't stick with me. I'm seeing a little drop in the number of folks in the show. Fannie and Freddie Mac to raise loan limits to almost 1 million in some areas, and that's an interesting change. And I get it. There are markets where the average price is over $1 million in these markets, and you want to facilitate folks buying homes. That sure does fit in. But we need to make sure we understand that Fannie and Freddie are government-sponsored entities, right? They're GSEs, which means if something bad happens, we get the bill, which is what happened last time, to the tune of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. If you remember TARP, right? There was the bank bailout. There was the Fannie and Freddie Mac bailout. And then, of course, there's the fact that when we do find ourselves in those situations where these organizations end up owning a ton of foreclosed properties, the way they then liquidate it is stupid. And this is another thing we talked about in past podcasts. They should have done an eBay style thing where all these properties were up there and individuals could simply bid on them. Instead, they put them into groups where the only folks who would have any hope of buying them were large corporations with millions and millions of dollars to spend. So they wanted to try to sell them in big chunks instead of one at a time, fundamentally screwing the little guy, right? And at the same time assuring that they would make the least on a per house basis. If they sold these houses in an eBay style auction scenario on a house by house basis, they would have made more money, right? Because if you're a corporate entity or some very rich entity spending $25 million on a bunch of houses, your expectation is you're paying less than you would have paid if you bought each of them individually, right? So anyway, and that's not the way that should work. So I realize I threw that one in there at the last minute, but that's always annoyed me in terms of the way they handled foreclosed properties. I think that is about it. I've covered everything I wanted to hit today. I even threw in a few little other things. I'm a little bummed we didn't get any questions. If you would like to ask a question, and maybe you can't participate. Maybe your weekends are absolutely chock full of things to do, and that's perfectly fine. If you've got questions that you would like me to answer on the next Coffee and Real Estate live chat, feel free to email them to me. You can go to soldbyrobert.com or therebelbroker.com and contact Robert. The button is right there. And simply send me your question. Just let me know that you saw me on the Coffee and Real Estate live stream and you would like to ask a question, and then ask it. And I will be happy to, if it's something I don't know off the top of my head, I'll do a little research and I'll share that in the next Coffee and Real Estate. Also, if you have thoughts on how to improve this experience, I'm doing it on Facebook. Technology failed me a few times when I tried to do it at the same time on YouTube and Facebook. I've got another little technical plan in the works to try to make it happen next time, and we'll see how that goes. But if you have suggestions on how you would like to see this stream improved or ways to interact that you think would be better, again, feel free. I'm happy to entertain those thoughts. As always, the goal is to leave you with more value at the end of the day in terms of information that I take up in your time. Hope we've achieved that today. If you'd like to reach out to me, head on over to soldbyrobert.com. Happy to help you with any of your real estate related needs, whether it's buying, selling, investing, or just chatting about real estate things that you care about. Feel free to reach out. Thanks again. I hope your coffee was as good as mine, and I will talk to you guys in a month.